What if I told you that the most controversial faith-based film in history is finally getting a sequel? And this time the stakes are even higher. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ shocked Hollywood back in 2004. It was raw, unapologetic, and brutally honest about the last hours of Jesus' life. It broke box office records, sparked global debates, and redefined what religious cinema could be. And then, silence. For 2 decades, fans speculated, would there ever be a continuation? Now, the wait is over. The long-whispered sequel, The Resurrection of Christ, is officially happening. Filming begins in Rome in 2025, and Gibson promises it will be the boldest project of his career. This isn't just another retelling of a familiar story. According to Gibson, we're about to witness the most important 36 hours in human history, portrayed with a level of depth and imagination the world has never seen. The film will explore mysteries few dare to touch. What happened in the unseen hours between Jesus' death and resurrection? What did it mean for him to descend into hell? How did that moment change the universe? And, perhaps most importantly, what does it mean for us today, in a world drowning in chaos and uncertainty? Stick with me because in this video, we'll unpack the legacy of The Passion, the extraordinary vision behind this new project, and why it could spark one of the most important cultural conversations of our time. And by the end, you'll have to answer one question. Are you ready to see the resurrection like never before? When Mel Gibson released The Passion of the Christ in 2004, no one, least of all Hollywood, saw it coming. At a time when religious films were either sanitized for family audiences or heavily fictionalized to fit commercial tastes, Gibson chose a path no studio dared to tread: brutal honesty and unflinching realism. His vision was radical. Instead of producing a soft, inspirational drama, he recreated the final 12 hours of Jesus' life exactly as described in the Gospels: bloody, raw, and painfully human. And then, he did something even more audacious. He filmed it in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, the ancient languages spoken 2,000 years ago. No English, no easy dialogue for global audiences. For investors, that was a nightmare. For Gibson, it was non-negotiable. If the story of Christ was to feel real, it couldn't be filtered through modern words and cultural comfort zones. The gamble came at a staggering personal cost. Every major studio in Hollywood turned him down. They didn't just reject the film, they warned Gibson it could end his career. Too religious, too violent, too niche, they said. But Gibson believed the story was bigger than his reputation. So he mortgaged his house, poured in tens of millions of his own money, and pushed forward alone. Filming itself was like a trial by fire. Jim Caviezel, cast as Jesus, endured physical and emotional extremes. In one of the film's most famous on-set incidents, Caviezel was literally struck by lightning during the Sermon on the Mount scene. He dislocated his shoulder carrying a 150-pound wooden cross, and at one point, he suffered hypothermia after hours of exposure in freezing conditions. Later, Caviezel said something chilling: "I didn't just play Jesus. I felt like I walked a tiny fraction of his path." If the production was grueling, the backlash was worse. Long before the film even premiered, critics attacked it as violent, fanatical, even anti-Semitic. Gibson was accused of fueling prejudice despite his insistence that the story wasn't about blaming a people, but confronting the universal human condition of sin. Protesters picketed theaters. Media outlets ran headlines branding him as dangerous. Some called it the most divisive film in decades. And yet, when The Passion of the Christ hit theaters, the reaction was seismic. The movie didn't just succeed, it shattered expectations, grossing over $611 million worldwide on a modest $30 million budget. That made it the highest grossing R-rated film at the time, and the most successful independent film in history. Why did it work? Because audiences were starving for something real. Hollywood underestimated the spiritual hunger that runs deep in modern society. While critics scoffed, millions lined up to watch a film in a language they didn't understand, simply because it felt authentic. They weren't just entertained, they were shaken, moved, and in many cases, changed. But success came with scars. The controversy surrounding the film marked Gibson's career for years. Some studios refused to work with him. His name became synonymous with risk and religious provocation. And yet, when asked if it was worth it, Gibson's response was simple: "I didn't care about the money or the critics. I just wanted to tell the truth." That truth shook the foundations of mainstream cinema. The Passion proved something Hollywood had forgotten. There is an audience for stories that go beyond spectacle and dive into the eternal questions of life, suffering, and redemption. And now, 2 decades later, Gibson is stepping back into the fire. Only this time, his ambition is even greater. So, what makes the resurrection of Christ so ambitious that it took Mel Gibson 20 years to attempt it? In one word, mystery. If The Passion of the Christ was about brutal historical realism, its sequel ventures into territory where scripture offers only glimpses and faith fills in the gaps. The 36 hours between Jesus' death and his resurrection. Now some of you might be wondering, wait, wasn't it 3 days in the tomb? Yes and no. According to Jewish timekeeping, any part of a day counts as a full day. Jesus died late Friday afternoon, remained in the tomb through the Sabbath, and rose early Sunday morning. By modern reckoning, that's about 36 to 40 hours. Those hours are the canvas Gibson wants to paint on, a canvas filled with cosmic significance. Why is this so compelling? Because those hours weren't silent. According to Christian tradition, this was when Jesus descended to the realm of the dead, an event theologians call the harrowing of hell. The Apostles' Creed mentions it briefly. He descended into hell. But what did that look like? How do you film an event that theologians describe as a cosmic battle? Christ breaking the chains of death and liberating souls who had waited for redemption since the dawn of time. Gibson's answer is to create something cinema has never attempted, a visualization of the invisible. This isn't just about showing an empty tomb. It's about plunging viewers into a spiritual reality where light collides with darkness. To achieve this, Gibson and his longtime collaborator Randall Wallace spent 7 years crafting the script, drawing not only from scripture, but also from ancient Christian writings and mystical visions, most notably those of Anne Catherine Emmerich, a 19th century nun whose vivid descriptions inspired The Passion. One of Emmerich's most striking visions describes Christ entering the realm of the dead like a flash of lightning. I saw the Lord as a beam of light piercing through the blackness of hell. Chains shattered, gates fell, and those who had waited in darkness rose in joy. Gibson plans to bring scenes like this to life using cutting-edge technology, something he didn't have in 2004. Remember how Gibson insisted on authenticity in the first film, even rejecting English dialogue? He's doubling down this time. Expect conversations in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin, just like before. But here's the twist. The mystical elements will be paired with technology that rivals the biggest Hollywood blockbusters. Think Lord of the Rings epicness, but with spiritual weight. Gibson's team will use advanced VFX to depict realms beyond human imagination. Heaven, hell, and the cosmic clash in between. Jim Caviezel is back as Jesus, but 20 years older. To maintain continuity, Gibson is using digital de-aging technology, the same kind that stunned audiences in films like The Irishman. But this isn't just about making Caviezel look younger. It's about preserving the emotional connection fans had with his original performance, while allowing for a portrayal that now emphasizes Christ's glory, power, and authority after the resurrection. Gibson isn't cramming everything into one film. Early reports suggest the story will be divided into 2 parts. The first will explore the descent into hell and the spiritual battle that followed the crucifixion. The second will focus on the resurrection appearances, intimate, deeply human moments, when the risen Christ confronted doubt, fear, and despair in his disciples. And that's another key element. Gibson doesn't want this to be just a cosmic spectacle. Yes, we'll see breathtaking visuals, but at its heart, this film is about transformation. The same men and women who ran in fear on Friday becoming fearless witnesses by Sunday. We're going to see Peter wrestling with guilt, Thomas demanding proof, and Mary Magdalene overwhelmed by joy. These aren't just biblical names, they're reflections of us, our doubts, our failures, our desperate need for hope. Here's the big question. Why make this film now? Why, in a world dominated by superhero blockbusters, TikTok trends, and endless streaming, would anyone risk millions on a spiritually intense story about the resurrection? Mel Gibson has an answer, and it's not about nostalgia. It's about timing. The world is in chaos. Wars, economic uncertainty, cultural polarization, mental health crises. People are drowning in noise yet starving for meaning. The same spiritual hunger that made The Passion of the Christ a global phenomenon hasn't gone away. It's grown deeper. Let's rewind to 2004 for perspective. Hollywood laughed at Gibson's idea, claiming no one wanted to watch a religious film in dead languages. They said it would flop, that audiences didn't care about old stories. And then, It became one of the most successful films of all time. Why? Because it touched something bigger than box office trends. It hit the deepest human questions. Why do we suffer? Does love conquer death? Is there hope beyond despair? Now, fast forward to today. Technology is dazzling, but anxiety, depression, and loneliness are at record highs. We scroll through endless feeds, yet feel empty. Gibson sees this cultural moment as a call to action. A world that's lost its sense of eternity needs a story that reminds it of ultimate hope. And this isn't just another faith film. It's not a feel-good sermon dressed in cinema. Gibson wants to create an immersive experience that rivals, and maybe surpasses, the biggest Hollywood epics. He wants people to walk out of theaters shaken, not by fear, but by wonder. That's why he's taking risks others wouldn't dream of, filming in ancient languages, depicting the harrowing of hell, and visualizing spiritual realities most directors wouldn't dare touch. Of course, with risk comes controversy. Expect the backlash to return. Headlines accusing the film of being too violent, too literal, too religious. And Gibson knows it. He's been here before. The first film sparked accusations of anti-Semitism, with critics claiming it reinforced harmful stereotypes. Gibson repeatedly stated that the intent was never to blame a people, but to show humanity's universal guilt. Yet, the storm raged. Add to that Gibson's own turbulent history, the personal scandals, the years of Hollywood exile, and you can bet the media will have a field day. But here's the thing, Gibson doesn't seem to care. In interviews, he's blunt. I'm not doing this for applause. I'm doing it because the story matters. And that's what makes this project so fascinating. It's not a career move, it's a conviction. But will audiences care? Can a film like this succeed in a culture hooked on instant gratification? The evidence says yes. The Passion proved there's a market for authentic, spiritually rich stories. In fact, its success sparked a wave of faith-based films over the last 2 decades. Yet none have matched its cultural weight. Gibson isn't just aiming to repeat the formula. He's aiming to go deeper, to create something that feels both ancient and epic, intimate and cosmic. And here's where it gets really interesting. This film isn't only for Christians. Sure, believers will flock to it, but Gibson wants skeptics in the seats too. Why? Because the resurrection isn't just a church doctrine. It's a claim that changes everything if true. That death is not the end, that despair isn't final, that hope is stronger than darkness. These are universal questions, and Gibson is betting that people, even those who don't share his faith, are hungry to wrestle with them. So, what's really at stake with the Rezer? It's not Jete. When Mel Gibson released The P, audiences walked. Think about that for a second. In a world obsessed with endings, news cycles of despair, entertainment that glorifies nihilism, this film declares a beginning. It reminds us that beyond the grave, beyond our failures, beyond every fear, there is life. And that's a message our culture desperately needs right now. Will it stir controversy? Absolutely. Will critics roll their eyes? Without a doubt. But maybe that's the point. Truth has always made people uncomfortable, and Gibson seems determined to make us feel that disc. So here's the question. Are you sure, not just as an ancient story, but as a reality with the power to transform your perspective on everything, from pain to purpose? If you are, stay tuned, because this isn't just a movie, it's an invitation. And if you've got thoughts about Gibson, about the first film, or about this daring new project, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Will the resurrection of Christ spark the cultural conversation we need most? Or is the world too far gone for hope? Let's talk about it.